All right, everybody, we're back. Not with the person that I just announced on the screen, but with Ian Pouncey. He's a senior accessibility specialist at the BBC. He's involved with writing standards, guidelines, training material, advising developers and designers on creating accessible websites and applications. He's been involved with the web and accessibility for 14 years, building a wide range of websites, from small sites for local business, the Metro version of the Yahoo homepage, and the framework on which all BBC pages are built. He is the author of Beginning CSS, Cascading Sheets for Web Design 3rd edition, W3C HTML Accessibility Task Force member, and a web accessibility advocate. So if you're ready, Ian, then you can get started.
Hi, yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Great, okay. I can't see my slides, which hopefully you can see, and the Adobe Connect at the same time. Are you seeing my slide deck?
We're seeing your slide deck, yep.
Excellent, okay. Well, thank you for the introduction, Hans. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about JavaScript for accessible web applications, or more appropriately, what client-side JavaScript is for in 99% of cases, and the stuff you need to think about when you use it in your website or application. So Hans has just introduced me very well, but I'll go through this anyway. I built the previous version of the Yahoo homepage with our team in America, responsible for accessibility, amongst other things on that. The BBC page framework is basically the bit at the top of the page, the top 40 pixels, the bottom couple hundred, and also the JavaScript libraries and shared components that are used on all the BBC web pages. And I wrote this book some time ago. I'm going to talk a bit about what JavaScript is used for, how it should be used a little bit. And then I'm going to go on to the two basic things you should make sure you do with JavaScript when you're writing websites or applications to make them accessible. So first up, what is JavaScript for? Before answering that, I think we should take a step back and talk about web technologies in general. So my starting point, and I hope you all agree with this, is that HTML is the foundation technology of the web. It's what the W3C refers to as the publishing language of the World Wide Web. So I have a question for you. What is CSS for? Is it just for making websites look good? Well, sort of, but not entirely. This is the inclusive design site with its CSS stripped out. I've used the web developer extension in Firefox to disable CSS, so you get a website. Except you don't. The reason that the header is bigger than the rest of the text and the spacing between browsers is that browser has its own CSS. So we haven't truly stripped out any CSS. But does this look good? It's not really. So why does the browser bother? How about this? This is the same thing, but basically stripped down even further. This is just effectively the text. It's got a bit of spacing between the paragraphs, but nothing else. Is there any difference between this? Well, yes. We've removed any of the visual hierarchy, any of the meaning that is provided by having headings and lists. So next example, what is the difference between this, which is the BBC homepage without CSS, and this? So why do we prefer this version to the previous? Well, the reason is because it's more usable. Content is in a legible font. It's easier to read. There's visually clear headings and lists, which help us to scan the document. There's margins between blocks of text, which has been shown to improve comprehension. In other words, it is for usability. And here we have Doge, we have, wow, so usability, much learnability, much design, wow. So, back, what is JavaScript for? Is this better than this? Why, which one is more usable? Here we've got a widget on the BBC Sport page. So this version that you can see now is shows all the data in one go. We have previous results, and then we have various football competitions and scores in past games, followed by the upcoming games today. Now the other version is this. We have previous results are collapsed away into their own section. You can expand that when you want to read it, or it takes up less space if you don't. So this makes it easier to focus on the content you want. There's less visual clutter. And again, the difference between this version with some of the data hidden and this with everything expanded is that it is more usable. More Doge, so audience, many simplicity, wow, very usability, much document design. So HTML plus many usability, that's what we are using these technologies for primarily in most cases, is to make our content, which could be just purely in HTML, we make it more usable. And I think this is what we need to think about primarily when we're writing CSS and JavaScript or creating new features. Does this improve my site? Does it make it more usable? And if you can't answer these questions in the positive, then you might want to rethink it. I was able to watch Mike Paciello's presentation in the small hours of my morning, and he referred to this as accessible user experience as one of the 5 things that we need to change in accessibility, and I completely agree with this. This is, it's not what technical accessibility is a solved problem, mostly because we keep trying to do more and more complex things on the web, but the priority needs to be an accessible user experience. User experience is key. So the age-old question for JavaScript: to enhance progressively or not to enhance progressively? Well, I'm going to give you some information and see if you can guess what my opinion on this. Be aware that I have cherry-picked this information to heavily weight it on one side of the argument. So, POUR, this is the W3Cs, the principles of accessibility. That web pages and applications should be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Robust means that content must be robust enough that it can be interpreted reliably by a wide variety of user agents, including assistive technologies. Now, I take this a step forward and say that there should be a wide variety of user agents in the widest variety of states that those user agents can be. And that's not just about has the user disabled JavaScript. I think that's not a great argument. But there's many things outside of the user's control, whether it's at work with a lockdown network, or that they're on a train journey where the Wi-Fi and 3G network is flaky, or that you have an error in your code. Really, there are many reasons why JavaScript may not run in the user's browser or device. So the most robust technology we have on the web is HTML. If we get that right, and then add CSS and JavaScript on top, then you're going to achieve, that's going to maximize the robustness of your website. But these are, some of the arguments that I hear about this. It's difficult. Well, I don't think it really is. I've generally found a progressive enhancement approach the easiest way to build applications. And I think it's it's a lot easier than doing everything in JS. I would rather write a button in HTML than create an element in JavaScript, even using JavaScript templating. It takes too long. Is it expensive? Well, I think it cuts down your testing time, because if you're going to rely on the flakiest technology in your development stack as JavaScript, then really you need to be putting a lot more resource into your testing time, and you've got to be more sure that you're going to work on every device and browser, because the consequence of your JavaScript failing could be, depending on how you built your site or application, that the user gets no content whatsoever. Now, if I build it in a progressive enhancement way, usually the worst case scenario is that my content will be displayed to the user. The core functionality of the page or the site or application will still function. It just won't be as good as it could be. My users don't disable JavaScript. As I said, maybe not, but errors in your code, drop connections, mischievous pixies somewhere along the way might disable JavaScript for you. And I'm making an app, not a website. Well, this idea of an application being, effectively requiring JavaScript, as I said at the beginning, this is the 99% case. 99% of the web is still web as a publishing platform. When we, it's the majority of cases is that the content is being consumed, it's not being written. Now, there are exceptions. If we take something like Gmail is obviously quite complex, but the fact that they have a basic version which does 99% of the things and the more complex things, or at least the important bits, so you can read your email and you can write emails. You may not have some of the nice things like grouping of emails and things like that, but it's still a usable mail client. Now, Google have chosen not to progressively enhance and have actually separate versions, and that's I'm not sure what the decision of that is. Maybe that I think probably because they just had the non-JavaScript requiring version already, so they didn't have to put any much effort into that. But they could have perhaps looked into progressively enhancement, their main offering, and just found it too complex. I'm not privy to that, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, most applications, to me, look like a bunch of forms and lists. And they're pretty easy to do in HTML. You just require you refreshing the page a bit more often. So here's a quote from Twitter. This is from 2012 when they re-architected the site. There are a variety of options for improving the performance of our JavaScript, but we wanted to do even better. We took the execution of JavaScript completely out of our render path. By rendering all page content on the server and deferring all JavaScript execution until well after that content has been rendered, we've dropped the time to first tweet to 1/5 of what it was. So what they're saying here is that because their site was faster, people could start using the site as it was intended. The primary function to send a tweet was available earlier. And performance is a usability issue, so we shouldn't dismiss that at all. Wow, says Doug, such apps, so usability, very hey. So that's the end of my slides for now. I'm going to attempt to do some demos, which is a pretty terrible idea. Have we got any questions at the time? So we've got Maya is
Had a raised hand,
saying,
Ian, by Javier, but I'm not sure if that was an actual question.
where we got, okay. Who's got the raised hands? Xavier, yes?
Comes in, then
we've got some typing. How am I doing? 18 minutes, okay.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. So may I, what was the counter argument to my users don't disable JavaScript, as I get that pushback all the time? Yes. So I think it's a false argument that that has nothing to do with robustness for that particular argument, really. JavaScript can fail for quite a few reasons. I can give you a concrete example, actually. For the BBC Olympics site, where there's quite a lot of pressure on building Olympic sites, particularly after the Australian Olympics, for example. So, and we were aware that being the national broadcaster, that we were going to probably, even though there is an official Olympic site, that the BBC's offering was probably going to be the place that people went to. So, like I say, a lot of pressure on us to get that right. And we did, spend a lot of time on the accessibility of it. We take as a measure of our success the fact that we got 0 complaints, which is as good as good feedback you're going to get, I think. So on one of the pages there was like an accordion widget. So it hit, as I shared before, it hid some of the content. You clicked a tab and it revealed it. Now, because we have slightly different requirements depending on where you are when you visit the page. So if you're not in the UK, for example, we serve you adverts. The big thing, the big thing we have to make sure that we never do is ever serve anyone inside the UK an advert because they've already paid to use the site. If we do that, we get into quite a lot of trouble. So we always err on the side of not serving an advert. But anyway, a combination of factors meant that outside of the UK, with certain types of data, there was a bug in this, which meant that the JavaScript errored, and the accordion widget didn't work. Fortunately, and we had code freezes when we come to big events, so we don't release code unless we really have to during a major event, and that goes across the whole BBC network. So the BBC News doesn't release anything while the Olympics is on, even though it's sport is a separate team. So we take it quite seriously. Any release of code is a risk. So, but because the team had built it progressively, effectively what happened when you clicked on that control is the page refreshed with a query string which showed the appropriate content. The product team were able to make a decision and not to release because although it wasn't quite as usable, it still worked and you could still access the content. So it's the disabled JavaScript thing is not really the reason you're doing it. You're doing it because your JavaScript may fail and you don't know why. It's the beauty of the web as a platform is that you can access it in many different ways, and the pain as a developer is that you can't test it in all of those ways. You're not even aware of them, perhaps. Okay, so moving on. Right, so going to talk about the first of the things that you should do with JavaScript. Number one is handle focus correctly. So I'm going to show you a very quick demo of the BBC homepage. This is the UK version. The US, the worldwide version is slightly different. I think I prefer the UK one. So I don't know how well this is going to work. Hopefully you can all see this on the screen. I'll assume silence means yes. So I'm going to go to the page, start tabbing through the links. I'm going to get to this more link, and the more link is the control for a little drawer of more links. I open that, and as you can see, what's happened is I've got focus on the first link in this control. So I tab back and forth, and hopefully you can see the link highlighting there. And so As a keyboard user, you're in the right place to continue tabbing. The screen reader user, you're going to be informed that you're inside a list of however many items that there are. It varies depending on the product that you're on and where you are in the world again. And so it serves two purposes. One, you in the right place. Two, as a screen reader user, you'll be informed that an action has taken place. You're not just staying in the same place. Another obvious sort of example of that is our skip links. So we have those on the page as well. So we jump down, and the next tab is the first article in the main content. Now, of course, things are not going to be that easy. So there are bugs in this. Of course there are. I got the right one. Okay, so this is Chrome. So if I tab to the skip to content link and go there, I jump to the viewport moves. So I press tab again, and I've gone back to skip somewhere else. There's actually down here a link as part of that main content. So that hasn't worked. So the problem is that in Chrome, Safari, and I believe now Opera, thanks to them sharing Codebase, in-page links will shift the viewport, but they do not change the keyboard tab position. So this has been documented by a few people. The first time solution I read was by Terrell Thompson in his blog post "Back to Basics: Skip to Main Content Links," who wrote and he wrote a jQuery function which basically manually it will automatically set focus when you clicked on these things. Then Nicholas Zakas wrote "Fixing Skip to Content Links" and came up with an alternative solution. Which can you see this code? Is this big enough? I can make it bigger if necessary. I'm looking at this function at the bottom of the page. I'm not going to go through line by line, but it'd be good if you can see it. Basically, what this does is adds an event listener on the for hash change. So that's this part of the URL, the hash main in this case. Changes to that. It gets an element based on that hash value. If that element exists, it checks to see if it's not already a focusable element. If it isn't, it sets tab index to -1. An element with tab index of -1 is programmatically focusable, but isn't a tab stop in keyboard tab order. So as you're tabbing through the document, it doesn't become another item. And then after it's done that, it calls element.focus on it. And fortunately for us, in all browsers, we skip to the content. I've artificially put a focus style on that so you can see it very clearly, even though it's text ugly. And the next thing in the tab stop is the link at the bottom. So that's worked correctly. So this is something that should just work, but we need to use JavaScript to make this work. This also fails for slightly different reasons in Internet Explorer, incidentally. That you don't need the JavaScript, but you do need the tab index. So I looked at this, and I wanted to sort of wrap it up into something that we could use at the BBC, and I started creating test cases for it, and then I thought, well, the other thing you can use these forms for is in forms. This is a WebAIM article that talks about form validation errors, and the idea of putting a list of the errors above the form, and having those errors link to the form elements. So they're basically skip links to the form elements. So that sounds like a good idea. So let's see how that works. So I'm going to, in this, tab to You've not entered your name. Okay, and you can see it is focused on the name required. So I'm going to type in my name, and nothing happens. It's set focus to the element, and I can't type anything into it. I press tab again, and I get to the email field, and I can type into it. So what's going on there? Now, what we can do is use Nicholas Zakas's hash change. Let's hope this works. It's the second time I've done it. So far my success rate is 0. So wish me luck. So let's try this again. You've not entered your name, and as before, it does not work. Right, you'll have to take my word for it. When this code runs, it does work. Brilliant. So let's try it in this. This is Firefox, as you can see. Now here we go. It works fine. Sorry, that's why it's not working. So hash change works in Firefox, but it doesn't work in Chrome. That's why it didn't work. But it doesn't work without this. It doesn't work in Firefox either. Sorry for that. So the other way of doing the skip links, as I said, is to just add an event listener. Click an event listener on your links. Based on that, you get the target. From the target, you can get the hash that was intended, and then you could figure out the element that it was going to target. Again, check to see if that's not already a focusable element. Basically, an anchor or form inputs. Set tab index -1 if they're not, and then element focus. So if I do that here in Chrome, you have not entered your name. Click there, and now I can type into the form successfully. So let's just try that in Firefox. Okay, so same code running. Let's just get rid of that just to be sure. There we go. So right, sorry. This is the right version. So let me just try that, and you can possibly see, may not work very well on this. So what's happening is I click that, you've not entered your name. Very briefly, I get focus on the name input field, and then it sort of disappears. It doesn't disappear, it sort of disappears between the elements. Kind of weird. I'm not entirely sure where it goes. The next tab stop is email required, so I can't type anything in again. So so it seems that the setting focus is required for Chrome, but it doesn't really fix the problem for everything else. So what I've found is that if it's not one of these focusable elements, what you need to do is sort of prevent the default action. So you don't prevent default, okay? So let's try that again. Of course it doesn't work now. There we go. So now it works in Firefox. Now the problem is here that you'll see that that there's no longer an update in the URL. So we can kind of force that, and we do window.location.hash equals the hash, right? Okay, so let's just try that here in Chrome, and hash is updated. It still doesn't work. So that's brilliant. Try it in Firefox, hash is updated, and everything works. So we've gone from by adding window.location.hash, we've got it to work in Firefox, but it fails in Chrome again. So it seems like to me that for basically when we're focusing on forms, the best we can do is just prevent the default action and not worry about the hash updating. Now, most of the times when you're going to be doing this sort of interaction with forms, you probably don't want to be able to bookmark that URL, because effectively what you're dealing with are errors in forms. And hopefully next time you go to that form, you aren't going to make the same error. So I don't think that's too bad. I think if you're very selective, you'd have to change this slightly. At the moment, this is including links to prevent the default action. That's not really a good idea. That'll break entirely. But for if you're going to set focus on a form element, I think this is the best approach that I've found so far. It seems to work in all cases. It's not quite as compact and neat as the hash change approach, I don't think, but it does have the benefit of basically working everywhere. Is there any questions about that? So it's quite a rush through kind of a weird bit of code. No, I will again take your silence as a complete understanding, or you've fallen asleep, one of the two. Okay, so what are we going to talk about next? So the other thing that you want to do when you're writing JavaScript, particularly so applications where you're updating content, maybe you've got a Twitter stream. Thank you, Steve. Or we have some new product at the BBC. It's called BBC Live, which is intended for like sporting events. And the idea is that it gives you the most up-to-date content about an event. So it'll be the score of a football game, followed with social media commentary and things like that. And we're also going to use it for some music events like upcoming Glastonbury. Thank you very much, Henny. So there's basically two ways of handling that for screen reader users, two main ways. The first is when content is updated, you set focus to it and provide some information. Maybe you set focus on there are 3 more tweets. Now the problem with that is that if on something like a BBC Live page, this is happening continuously and it's happening without any user interaction. It's kind of the point of the page. So you'd be possibly reading one part of the page and suddenly the focus would be forced to another part of the page. Now that is, I wouldn't just say it's a bad user experience. I would say that it's an utterly broken user experience. It's fine to set focus on things based on user action, and we definitely should in those cases. But just to arbitrarily shift focus, that doesn't work. So luckily we've got our shiny new technologies. We've got live regions. Now live regions are not perfect. They have their problems, but they can be quite good for this sort of thing. I wouldn't rely on them 100%. In the case of the live sport, we're still trying to figure out, I think, what the best way of handling these updates are. But live regions should certainly play a part, I think. So I don't know how this is going to work. I'm going to demo this on my iPhone, actually, rather than trying to get output from my computer, be recorded by the microphone on my computer, and hopefully get to you. So let's see if this works. I've basically got the same page that you can see. It's just a message box, and I type into it, this is a message, create the message, and it updates that. This element here is a live region. I'm creating with JavaScript because I think that if you're going to have elements that only work with JavaScript, you best create them in JavaScript. There's a great blog post from Leonie Watson who talks about like the best ways of getting live regions to work. For what I remember, that a role of status and an area live value of polite is the best, widest supported combination of the various attributes you can use to make live readings work. So we create an element, and then the add function literally just empties the area and replaces it with a message. So let me fire up my iPhone.
Safari. Message. Text field. Is editing. This is a message.
Okay, so I'll just put this as a message into the text field, same as before.
Create message.
Hit the button.
Create message. This is a message.
And you hear that it's updated that content and read out that text. So what we can do there is with our Twitter updating widget on our page, when it updates, we probably want to be sensible about this and try and do it for every single tweet that comes in. But maybe you might say to pick an arbitrary time every minute or so when there are new messages, alert the user, say there are new messages in the Twitter stream, and then provide a hint on how to get to it. The heading that they should navigate to, something like that. As I say, this is not something to rely on, and I think it's rare that you have these sort of applications where, well, becoming more common, but it's not every day that we're creating applications like this. On a live page, it's kind of an interesting situation because the user is kind of aware that things are going to update on the page, so because it's the whole purpose of it. So we can get away with things a bit more, but usually if you've got this sort of thing on there, you probably, like I say, just every few minutes you might want to alert the user, but it's not something that you should interrupt them with all the time. Certainly using the area live value of polite is the best way to go. It's not errors. What screen are you using? That was just VoiceOver on my iPhone, where it works quite nicely. Okay, so I managed to get through that a bit quicker than I expected. So that's the end. Are there any questions? Can we detect non-JS users in Google Analytics? I don't know. In theory, you can. I mean, the problem with sort of the non-JS case is that you're not usually with these things that the way to do it is you have a NoScript element which contains like a beaconing image, and you detect for that. But the problem with that is you're detecting the NoScript case, which is JavaScript is effectively not supported, not that it's failed for whatever reason. So it's a bit of a false metric, I think. Steve, got an opinion? But I don't use Google Analytics, so I can't answer that question specifically. Okay, so Steve's asking, where do you sit on the non-JS issue? Must all web applications work without JavaScript? No, they not all. And not everything within a application should. I think that's my problem with the word application. Is it's often used as a reason not to take a progressive enhancement approach. There are some genuine things which are applications. I'm not going to suggest that you should try and do a in-browser photo editing application without JavaScript. But how often are we really doing that? I'd say it's pretty rare. The web still things like what the BBC is doing, what the majority of what Google's doing. Google has, does it require JavaScript for its search results? No. Does it require it for Google Documents? Yes. And that's kind of fine, because without the the immediacy of client-side JavaScript using Ajax, it becomes unusable. It's beyond unusable. And I think they're a particular case. They are genuine applications. They just happen to be run in the web, and I think they're fine. I'm also, I'm not as hardline as I may seem within sites. I'm not trying to suggest that that like an autocomplete or auto-suggest on a search form needs to work without JavaScript. I've been trying to figure out how to phrase this for our own internal use, and the best I've come up with is an idea of kind of core purpose. So, what is the point of this page? What are you trying to do? So let's take the Sport Live example. I would say that the core experience of that is that it shows you the latest possible version, latest possible data about it. Now, latest possible depends on what technology is available at that time. It could be just whatever the latest time is at the request, or more likely what we've got in cache at the time of request. But with JavaScript, that can be, without JavaScript, that page gets delivered, and it gets delivered with a link which says content that says this page was, last updated at this time and date. Click here to refresh. With JavaScript, that refresh happens automatically. So Steve has also many applications we work with for vendors are for intranets. Okay, so intranets are an interesting case again. So you have a bit more, the technology that's being supported. You've got a more accurate view of your baseline. You've still got the problem of robustness, I would say. And as I say, I've not yet worked on anything where the sort of core proposition of a page is actually harder to implement with progressive enhancement. The exceptions are things which, I'd say, Google Docs, etc., just wouldn't work. So look for a basic view, Google Docs, basic view without JavaScript. Do you mean as a view but not input? Yeah, that sounds reasonable, but is that the point of Google Docs? I don't know. That's up to sort of Google and the user to decide, really. Right, how can I convince my boss to take accessibility seriously? We have a transactional website, and my boss says that blind people don't do online transactions, so I do care about it. Can I prove by any sort of data that disabled people also use e-commerce websites? Okay, so is Mike Paciello still here? Looks like he might be. So I suggest you look at Mike's presentation from last night, where you talked about this, Mike, to some extent. What was it? The stationary sort of case study. And if you want a bottom line reason, is that there's money to make from the audience. That's a fairly straightforward argument. I think most companies will buy that. Another thing Mike covered is sort of the legal angle, and I don't think. I think we'd all prefer that wasn't the best way to go about it, but in some cases it is. Depending on where you are in the world, there will be laws and legislation around this. So, Steve, understand, so this is back to the JavaScript. We tend to be involved at end of design cycle. There is no way for us to make a use case. Yes. Okay, so basically anything to do with accessibility is vastly harder to do at the end of the design cycle, I think. I recommend you listen to some of Henny's presentations on the subject, which is I don't know what you're talking about today, Henny. Accessibility starts with UX. Perfect. Go and look at Henny's presentation on that entire subject. And in the case progressive enhancement is a usability issue, not accessible. Absolutely agree. Couldn't agree more. Well, I'd say JavaScript as a technology is. As I say, I tend to stretch that, the principles of, principle of robustness a bit further. The idea there, in my view, is that you should be able to use, within reason, whatever device works for you. And if the device that you find most accessible is, 5-year-old Nokia, which doesn't run very good JavaScript, I'm not saying that we should support that and try and achieve the same sort of experience as we would do on a iPhone 5S or whatever. But I'm saying it's possible, and I don't like I say if your project is planned correctly, that there's no reason why a base level experience can't be delivered. But yes, JavaScript as a technology is not an accessibility issue any more than HTML is. If you write it badly, it causes accessibility problems. If you write it well, it's perfectly fine. No problem, Steve. I'm kind of used to having these arguments. Yeah. So so WCAG accessibility support baselines, and I think they're kind of fine. What I'm talking about mostly is sort of it's less of an accessibility issue more than what I think is a sensible software development and architecture approach. So it is an ongoing debate within the BBC, but I'm very pleased to hear that this is broached on an internal mailing list recently. While on a discussion of web standards, I introduced this idea, and the support we've got from our developers has basically been 100% positive. Because I think we at the BBC, we write, the sort of sites we create are pretty standard. It is probably what a large proportion of the web is really. We have fewer cat videos, but we still have some. You see progressive enhancements surely mean to ease accessibility, also not just usability to go in person. I'd refer back to the idea from Mike about accessible user experience. That we need to get past this sort of purely technical, mechanical accessibility. Does a screen reader read out this piece of text? Yes or no? Yes is not quite a good enough answer. It's got to be yes, and it's a good user experience. Yes, informational sites should be usable without JavaScript for sure, and they're the majority of the web at the moment. But there's was it Illustrapart which has the new new post about accessible applications. and it uses an example of that of like a shopping cart. And there weren't many comments when I was there, but there was someone who was writing a comment who had experience in building shopping carts and was saying, yeah, obviously this you need to write all this JavaScript to make them work. And I was thinking, I was writing shopping carts in the year 2000, and I didn't write that much JavaScript to them. Now, it's not that they wouldn't have been more usable if I hadn't written more JavaScript, auto-updating of amounts when you change them, things like that. But it's certainly not necessary. And at the end of the day, I would much rather write the code to execute on the server to populate the table of my shopping cart than even do it on a client-side templating language. It's just faster, and it's in an environment that I control. There's quite a lot of benefits, I think. It was a great presentation, Mike. I enjoyed it. It was fortunately, as an insomniac, being up at 2 a.m. and having to get up at 6 a.m. to do this didn't really make much difference. Let's see. So I've mostly seen that only big companies have accessible team. For startups, it's still a luxury. Unless we have accessibility law in my country, no one will care till then. Yeah. So I've had this discussion with a friend of mine who has his small business, and I'm not going to name the company, and it's tangentially works with educational organisations, and I was like, surely you have to think about accessibility in those cases. And his answer was always, yeah, but we can't afford to. There's only a few of us. We're just finding our feet, and it just struck me as kind of, having the background I do in this is that was like seemed short-sighted, and but it was a position he maintained until about a year ago when he gave me a phone call, say, could we meet up and could you give us some advice about making our thing accessible? It is difficult. My aim for sort of promoting accessibility, and most of them, I'm no Steve Faulkner. I don't know how Steve has enough hours in the day to do all the things he does. I mostly sort of deal within the company I'm working for, unfortunately. What I'd love to be able to just sort of push this as accessibility as just day-to-day best practice. I mean, if we look at HTML, we've got WCAG, a big document, and you take quite a lot of that. You just see that effectively what it means is write HTML in the way that it's intended to be written. And yeah, we do need the sort of the guidance documents, how to handle these cases. But it's still it's a poor state of affairs where we still need to occasionally talk about alt attributes for images. But unfortunately, that's where we are. Okay, so as for hello, Mike. Accessibility in an organization just takes 2 people to give it down. Yeah, I think do you tend to follow up on that? I think we don't require a separate team of people. All developer design should take care of it. It's not that hard. Yeah. So a team. We have a small accessibility team at the BBC. It is very small. We don't. It'd be nice to have a few more people, but what we don't want to be is sort of the police force for the BBC in accessibility. We want to basically facilitate the product teams, designers, developers, testers to be able to just go and do this for themselves. So we focus on our own internal standards and training. We're not the people who are necessarily doing the accessibility testing, except in a few cases. Yeah, every site app we audit has basic issues such as all. Yeah, exactly, and it's do we fix that by teaching people about accessibility? Do we fix that by teaching people about HTML? I don't know. Right. So do you have any tips, Ian, for tools a non-developer can use to try to check for accessible code? I have a free screen reader, tab through it, so it's someone can use to test. That's a very good question. I think we're trying to, we're working on some internal training for this sort of thing. I think I really like. Just to pimp Mike a bit more, he's talked again about screen readers and things like that not being a commodity, just something that's built into your environment, and that's one of the great things about, I think, developing on a Mac at the moment is that I'm a 2D shortcut away from having a screen reader running. And yes, it only really works in Safari and a little bit in Firefox, but it's trivially easy as a developer for me to, quite frequently just fire that up and not try to, I'm not trying to be a screen reader user, but just to see, can I access all this content? Does focus get the right place when I activate this control, things like that. And I think that's kind of a really useful thing for developers to do. QA as well. I mean, the screen readers are kind of, the easy stuff's relatively easy, and it takes a long time to kind of master them. I'm certainly no master of using screen readers, but I think there's a good enough. I think validation of HTML is a useful thing still. It will point out a fair few things to you. There's things like Wave Toolbar. That I still use those because it catches kind of the easy stuff. It will show me an outline of the page and let me catch broken heading structures and things like that.
Right, Ian, we've run out of time.
Right.
So thank you very much for this interesting talk.
Time flies.
And if anybody has any more questions for
thank you very much for
know where to find them.
But thank you to TPG particularly. Oh.
Yeah. Oh, great. It's great to organize this and to have everybody involved. And I hope to see you again soon, Ian.